Hey there, I invite you to play the song Carnival of Venice. And this is well named because it's actually a tune that was really well known in the early 1800s in Venice at their carnival. And it was just associated with that. And a lot of composers took this song and used it as a vehicle to write their own stuff. And so we're going to attribute this particular version to Julius Benedict, who mainly wrote operas and things like that. But really, he didn't actually write this Carnival of Venice theme. He just happened to set it. And he didn't write it for guitar, but we take it from his version because we like it and we arrange it for guitar. So this is a great piece at the early-ish level. So it is great for beginners. And it also provides some really good musical content. And so in this video, I'll play it for you and then we'll talk about it, and we'll talk about all sorts of things, how to learn it, how to practice it, and some musical tips as well to make it sound better for you. So first off, let's take a look. Right, so if you would like to download the music for this so that you can play it and you can learn it, you can do that at the link below. And with that, let's just dive into this piece. So here we have the entire piece. This is just our overview piece. This has got tabs with it. You can also get a version without tabs if you would just prefer just to use notation. There's a link that you will find if you click the link below, then you can get a notation only version of it. So when we're looking at a big piece of music like this, any piece of music, we don't want to just tackle it, start at the very first note and just plow in. We might read it through once just to see what's ahead, but that's not a good way to learn pieces, is to just plow through like that way. Instead, what we want to do first, before we do anything else, is to break it into little bitty sections. And so here, we can just use our ear to decide how much is a section. Well, that sounds like a section to me right there. And so it's about 4 bars. And usually your sections will be about 4 bars. 2 or 4 is most common in pieces of music. And so here we're going to just draw a line here. And there's a reason I'm not drawing them at the end of the measures, and we'll talk about that. But you can just break your piece up into all these little bitty bits and then practice the bits, and that will be a much better way to learn your pieces. So now that we're doing that, we can also look at, from this big overview sense, we can also just look at the general sense. Is there anything weird going on? Are there big sections can we see? We can look at this word moderately and kind of decide what does that actually mean when we look at that. Sometimes it'll be an Italian word that you might not know, in which case it's great to just take that opportunity to look it up before you even dive in. There's nothing really standing out with this, so we're just going to go right to the very first section. So one of the reasons this piece is so cool is that the melody is in the bass. So your thumb has the melody the whole time. It's very vocal in that way. And so one of the things that you can do is just looking at this, you can decide what is the melody, what is going to be played with my thumb, and what is not melody. And here we've got it to where we have stems down and we've got stems up. And so those stems down are the melody, and then the stems up are the accompaniment. And so one of the things that we can do that's going to make all of our music sound so much better is that we can always know what is the melody and what is not the melody. And then we can really keep our ear on the melody and make sure that that's coming out. Oftentimes with these chords like this, less so in this because it's not happening at the same time as the melody note, but oftentimes what you'll find is that there are these accompaniment parts, then they can drown out the melody especially if there's moving bass lines and all this kind of stuff. The melody can get lost within all the stuff. And so instead, it's great to just bring out that melody. Now, since this is a melody-heavy piece and it's in your thumb, one of the things you can do right at first is listen to your thumb sound. Now, we start on this open G note. You can just listen to that and find where is it and how do I play so that that sounds really nice and rich and sonorous. And so then you can look, right hand technique is beyond the scope of this video, but it is a whole thing in classical guitar of how you use your hand and how you position it and everything else. But in short, you can listen and find whatever the sound is, because some places you'll know that it's very nasal. And other times you can position your thumb and you can play on the guitar in different ways, closer to the neck, and it'll be richer and more warm and fuzzy. And so you can decide what is the best sound that I can get. So just spend a second on it. The next is looking at those accompaniment notes, and this is mostly on the first and second string. So that as well, we can just look at that and say, how am I going to play these? Now, in our program, we really recommend pushing from the big knuckle for these fingers. So moving from this big knuckle and pushing in and using lots of nice follow through to keep your hand relaxed. So it ends up being this, as opposed to pulling up like this, which is oftentimes very bright and tense. So instead, push through the strings. Now, you don't have to follow through all the way into your palm every single time you're playing this, because they should be quiet. The melody is louder, and so then these shouldn't be too loud. But move from there and give it some follow through, and then listen to the balance of the bottom note and the top note, and just listen to it. And if one's really coming out, then maybe think about how you're doing that and just play with it, experiment, try to get those more even. With a thing like this that is truly an accompanimental chord, we don't want one note louder than the other. There's nothing melodic in these little accompaniment chords. So that's the hand in general. That's our sound. So as we learn a section, the first thing that we can do, now that we're actually learning these notes, one of the things that we can do first is to clap this rhythm. And if you'll notice, we start in on this partial bar right here. This first measure only has one beat in it. This is called a pickup note. And so then the way that we count this is 3. 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And this is the end of our section, because these notes are actually pickups for the next phrase. And so with this, we say 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. And so you can find out what is the melody, and you can clap that and count it. Next up, you can just play just the melody and just work out these notes. Just that right there, and just listen to it. Make it as nice and beautiful and flowing as you possibly can. Count aloud if you'd like to. 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Then we can add in the accompaniment notes. And with the accompaniment here, we start out with this, and we need to make a really nice tunnel in that with that first finger so that we can still hear that open E next to it. So that's going to be the trick with that chord, is going to be making that nice tunnel. And so as long as we're doing that, we'll be able to hear both of those notes. Now in this music, I've written A, M, and that is the ring and the middle finger. So P is the thumb, I is the index, M is the middle, and A is annular, or the ring finger. And I've written that, but also you can use your index and middle if you would rather. So either one of those works for this. When you're playing this, here's just a little musical tip for you. Keep it quiet, like we talked about, so that it's really clear what's what. Two different things, da-dum, and then there's something else coming in. Boom, da-da, boom, da-da-da, boom, boom. And so keep those separate in your head. If it helps, you can just count 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And then the first finger moves over there to we go into a G7 chord. So that's a great way to practice. I'll also briefly mention, if you're at this place and you're playing, and if you're not, then you can just ignore this, but you're welcome to place these accompaniment notes. So instead of putting them, just kind of casting them off and throwing them in there, It can sound a little bit careless. Instead, if you place them just like you were putting a teacup on a table, then it's still in time, it's not late, but it's just not early. And it just sounds like you've completely shifted your attention and that's all you do. It's like as if somebody else was singing and you were playing the accompaniment. And so you were just really just boom, dropping those notes in. So the difference is da da boom, da da boom, da da. So it's something to play with. It's called placement, and note placement it's a thing, and it's a study. So it's not late. It's just as late as it possibly can be without being late. So placed. Getting into our second section here, I'll just play it for you. Now the only thing I'll talk about here are these repeated notes here at the end. And with these repeated notes, there is a rule with this. Of course, rules are meant to be broken, but I suggest you follow this one most times and certainly follow it here. And that is that repeated notes start quiet and get louder. We use a ramp for this. And so whenever you have this, in general, repeated notes sound better if you start them a little bit back and then get louder. That way you don't sound like you got stuck on it, like you just got somewhere and are just hammering away at this note. Instead, it feels like it's moving forward. It's actually, something's happening in the music. So here we have da, 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 get bigger. Quiet, and then get louder. It doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't have to be clownish with it, but it really helps in your practice if you are clownish and you do exaggerate it. Because then whenever you actually play the piece, you'll compress that. It won't be as exaggerated, but you'll have the muscle memory built in to do something. If you're really subtle while you're practicing your volume swells and fades, then if you get nervous or if you're playing with somebody or if you speed things up, oftentimes it gets to be so subtle that you don't even hear anything happening. And you still think it's happening, but nobody else can actually hear anything happening. So it's nice to exaggerate. Next, I'd like to jump ahead to measure 25. So at measure 25, we have the highest melody note of the piece up here. We jump up to the 5th fret. So we have the 3rd finger on the 5th fret of the 3rd string, the pinky comes in next, and then the 1st finger on the 3rd fret. So here it is. And then we drop back down. So that's our chord up there. So these are some tips for practicing. You can just go section by section and work out what's actually happening in there. Listen to the melody, make it flow like you want it to, play with it in a few different ways if you would like to, and put it all together. Practice one section next to another, add a section, remove a section, bounce around, but work in pieces and then bring the whole thing together. If one part of this really stumps you, then instead of just plowing through the whole piece a bunch of time, really just separate that spot and work on it separately. It's much better practice that way. And again, if you'd like to download the music to this and play it yourself, you can do that at the link below. And again, you can get the tab version and you can get a notation version, either or. It comes in a book with a bunch of other pieces as well that are equally charismatic and fun to play. So you can enjoy that. With that, good luck in your playing, have fun, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.